Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the AI Spy. I hope you've caught up with all our past episodes. If you haven't, please do so. We've had some excellent speakers. Also, please subscribe so that way you don't miss any of our episodes. So today we're talking about a very, very critical topic, romance scams. So romance scams have been one of the top issues. If you followed the IC3 reports, romance scams were, I think, the top issue for the last 2 years. This year, there's in the US alone, the estimated losses to romance scams are around 5 billion. So there's quite a lot of work that needs to be done to raise awareness and educate people to tackle romance scams. If you followed our last episode, we spoke with Meena Chang, and she brought out the transnational nature of romance scams, and that's one of the reasons why it's so hard to fight or to break the cycle of romance scams, is because these fraudsters, they are spread across the globe. There are fraud syndicates and fraud compounds in Southeast Asia, Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, Dubai even, where fraudsters work in almost call center-like environments, trying to reach out to people globally and scam them. So, to unpack this topic of romance scams, joining me today is a brilliant author, and she wrote this book called Keanu Reeves is Not in Love with You. My guest and I have two things in common. We are both obsessive list takers, and we both hate spinach. Becky, welcome to the show.
No, do you know, you're the only person that I've so far spoken to has said that they hate spinach as well. Everyone's always telling me off about it.
So I'll tell you my reasons why I hate spinach, but why do you hate spinach?
It's the texture. You know, when people really overcook it and it becomes like the slime that kind of gets on the top of a pond. It's just makes my skin crawl.
So I think our reasons are very similar. So I'm of Indian origin. I grew up in India, and there's this Indian dish called saag paneer or palak paneer,
Yep.
where they cook spinach to, it's literally death to spinach, because you cook it for so long that there's nothing left of value, and then they blend it. So it's just that green slime. And I used to, as a kid, I used to watch Ghostbusters, and the slime that the ghost, you would see it resembles that, and I used to hate it. And that's how my hate for spinach. That's my origin story of why I hate spinach.
And it's equally as valid.
So Becky, first thing I do on the podcast, I always ask my guest about their origin story. So maybe give us a little bit of your background and why romance fraud, and why write this book.
So my background, this is my first book. So my background isn't as an author. I've only just become one over the last 2 years. My background was in public relations and crisis comms. So very, very different. It was in financial services, but very different. And I got ill a few years ago and had to give up work. So things were very tough. I had this career that I loved and I had to stop. And then lockdown hit as well. And it was sort of, oh my God, now what? Could life get any worse? And I joined Twitter for something to do, genuinely for something to do. And within a few days, my inbox on Twitter was absolutely full of really handsome men who said they worked in the army. And they were all saying, hello, dear. Hello, my queen. Hello, beautiful. Now, if one person had messaged, I might have thought, oh, okay, I'll have a chat with you. But because there were so many all at once, it was really obvious what was going on. Now, at the time, I didn't necessarily think about romance fraud because I wasn't working in that space. I didn't know anything about it. I just thought that something was funny about it. But as time went on, I discovered more about romance fraud and how misunderstood it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And misunderstood and also underreported I think it's
absolutely.
1 in 3 or something, or one in 5.
Do you know what? I think it's probably even less. And the statistic that you gave out at the beginning is very, very shocking, but I guarantee you it's way more than that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because I'm only talking about the reported. And
of course, yeah.
If you look at the IC3 crime report, there's no box called pig butchering. There's investment scams, and these scams fall into many different buckets. Yeah. Right? It could be, hey, honey, we want to have a life together. Let's go and invest in this thing, or let's invest in crypto. And so those get flagged under crypto scams or investment scams. So
Yeah.
Definitely, definitely underreported. So, Becky, one of the cool things about the book that I saw, and it's a pattern that runs throughout the book, is that every few pages you write down red flags, or you write down some of the tactics that these scammers have been using with you. And I think some of them you experienced firsthand, the others are from the victims that you spoke to. But if you without giving away the whole book, if you have to talk about a few red scams or tactics that these scammers use, what would those be?
I think when somebody contacts you on social media or on a dating site, say, or even on online gaming, there seems to be a lot of fraudsters hanging around those as well. I think the occupation that they give you, that they do, there seem to be a number of occupations that romance fraudsters absolutely love. And they are a soldier working abroad, often American soldier, but that might just be that they contact English women as American soldiers, people who work on oil rigs, pilots. It tends to be careers where they have to work away from somewhere.
Right.
So they have this brilliant reason as to why they can't meet you. And they also have brilliant reasons why they can't get to their bank, why they might be cut off from their source of money. So it becomes a more legitimate way of asking you for money. So their choice of job is one. Secondly, one thing I always say is that you will know when someone's up to no good because they will try and get you off a particular platform as quickly as they can. So let's just say, for example, that somebody contacts you on Twitter and you talk for a little while and they say, I'd really like to take this conversation off Twitter. Now, you have to think to yourself, well, why? They will try and get you off one of these platforms onto something like WhatsApp or Google Chat or Viber, Telegram, because those particular platforms, they can't have their accounts shut down. So somewhere like Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, various places like that, if they're reported enough, their accounts will get shut down. Once they've got you onto one of these other platforms, that's it then. You're kind of theirs. They can contact you forevermore.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent. So I think Doctors Without Borders, that would be another great profession, I guess, where you have to try. I don't
Absolutely.
know
Yeah.
if someone reached out to you. These scammers, another thing, they follow a script always. And sometimes they follow the script to the T, and that's to their detriment. And one of the things I noticed, and this is a part where I was laughing out loud, and my wife actually had to check on me saying, what are you watching? I'm like, no, I'm actually reading this book. So it's the part when I think someone reached out to you, and then I think they're pretending to be a celebrity. I think it was anyway, it doesn't matter. They're pretending to be an American Hollywood celebrity, and I think maybe even Keanu Reeves saying that I'm from Canada originally, blah 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 blah, and then you say, oh, I'm from Rectum, England, and then the person says,
Yes.
yeah, and then the person says, oh, it's great there. I haven't been there in a while. So. And I think the other time, I forgot my notes, but I think it's someone pretending to be Elon Musk, and then you say, "Tell me about the Tesla chlamydia," and they
Yeah.
actually go on. They don't flinch. You can throw them off. You can try to throw these things at them, but they stick to their script.
What I've found is that you can basically come up with any town or city name you want to. So when somebody pretending to be a celebrity says which of my films is your favourite, you can come up with anything. I mean, I won't talk about some of the ones that I've said because some of them are quite rude, but yeah, you just absolutely anything as nonsensical as you like, and they say, "Oh yes, that's very good." It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
I have to ask you. So you're pretty good at sketches. Some of the sketches, and I'm not going to give away what I'm talking about, but I think some of the gift card sketches and even the sketch of Keanu Reeves that you draw is pretty good. So did you take like drawing lessons, or this is the hobby on the side?
I've actually got an art degree.
Oh, that makes sense now.
Anytime I've used it, I do. The drawings of the gift cards that I do are deliberately really awful because I want to see whether they can look at that and think, oh, this woman's taking the mickey. But even then, I've sent these over and they've said, no, that's not the right thing. And I've thought, what? How could you not How can you not see what I'm doing? But they still try and put the gift card numbers in, that I've made up to be, rude.
Yeah,
And it's,
yeah.
yeah.
The Steam card was my favorite, by the way, where you had the Steam and the card next to all the iron, the
Yeah,
iron.
iron, and then the kettle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it was hilarious. A romance fraud. Obviously, it's a very very serious topic, but the tone that you have throughout the book, it's very light and humorous throughout. It's funny. It's a great read. See, and that's one of the reasons why I got through the book very quickly. I finished it. I finished the book very very quickly. Now I'm hosting this podcast. I want to appear all intelligent and worldly, but you give me a Murakami, I'll be sleeping, snoring on my bed. I can't get through that book. So something about the book, the tone, it's very engaging. So what was that conscious effort, or that's you just started writing and that's how it is?
A bit of both. So my natural style, probably as a person, but certainly as a writer, is to be maybe a little bit tongue-in-cheek, a bit wry, a little bit sarcastic perhaps. But I'm also a really big believer that serious subjects, you can get a message across by using a bit of humour sometimes. Because fraud, it can, when you're talking to people who work outside of the counter fraud industry, it can be very boring. And, often if I try to talk to some of my friends about fraud, they're like, oh my God, shut up. And, I've been to conferences where people start talking about fraud and you see people in the audience getting their phones out and scrolling through, social media. But I think that doesn't have to be the case. And actually, if we want to reach more consumers, we should be trying to do things in a more engaging way. So far feedback has been good. It's worked, and my Twitter following is kind of testament to that. And I think we need to be thinking of ways that we can get people interested in the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you were having, you had your Twitter handle death to spinach, and you were having these, let's say, you were having your fun with these fraudsters, and you were posting. And a few romance scam victims actually reached out to you because of what you were posting, and because it was funny, and then that you could see the light side, and they connected to that part, right?
Exactly. So what happened was I was posting up the screenshots of these conversations on Twitter, and my following was growing because people were finding it funny. Now, an unintended consequence of that is that people who had been the victim of romance fraud started messaging me saying, this has actually happened to me. And because none of them wanted to tell anybody, which of course is one of the problems with romance fraud, it's very underreported. And I found myself being kind of a sounding board for a few people who hadn't told anybody else in their life. Now, at this point, I didn't know much about romance fraud. I was just somebody messing around on Twitter.
Yeah.
But I started talking to these women and a couple of men, I have to say. And it was then that I realised what a big subject it is and what an impact it actually has on the people who they manage to get money from.
Right. And I'm glad you said that you spoke to a few women and men as well, because many times we romance scams we pigeonhole or stereotype the victims. We say that the victims are only middle-aged single women, but it's not true. It's across this way. Anybody can fall victim to a romance scam.
Yeah, absolutely anybody. And statistically, it is 50% male and female. I mean, as with a lot of things, men are less likely to report it, I think, because there's possibly a pride element there. But also because this isn't 100%, but on the whole, women are lured by these romance fraudsters with the promise of love. And men are lured with the promise of some form of sexual gratification. Yeah. Now, what that means is that a lot of men, it then goes down the sextortion route. So they don't want to report this because potentially they have more to lose in terms of, if their wife finds out, or they don't want their children to know, or they don't want their colleagues to know. So it's the reason that the book is only about women is because there was actually too much to fit into one book. If I was to look at both men and women, and I had to choose one, and I am a woman, so I just thought I'd
Oh,
go
that's
with that.
perfect. So that was one of my questions. That like one of my next questions was, it is very hard to write a book. It is very hard to decide what to put in a book, but it is harder to leave out stuff, to decide what to leave out. So how did you go about that? And I think you gave one example where you left out saying, okay, let's focus on the victim stories and look at it from a female gaze, and let's leave out all them. So was that, or there is other stuff? And maybe give if you can remember something interesting from the stuff that you left out, give us a sneak peek of that.
Oh. So the biggest thing to leave out was deciding to leave men out, because I know that when I talk about romance fraud online, a lot of people say, what about us men? You know, we have a hard time as well. And I say, yeah, of course you do. But it is harder to get men to talk about these things. So I would have been able to interview less. In terms of what else I left out, what I do know is that I sent my manuscript in to my publisher, and I think it was 75,000 words. And they said, this is great, but you need to lose 15,000 words. And I went, you what? It's absolutely livid. And I'd put all this stuff in there, all these, well, I thought were amazing things. I ended up losing 10,000, and it's so much better. But because it was my first book and I hadn't sort of worked out how to really tighten stuff up, when they said lose that amount of words, I was having a little tantrum on my own in my flat. In terms of what else I had to leave out, I left out... No. I didn't leave out. I stopped researching. In the book, there's a section about some of the fraudsters over on the west coast of Africa, so specifically Nigeria and Ghana. And there's a section there talking about some of the prevalence of voodoo and scammers going to these kind of magic men to try and make them better scammers. And there was I did a lot of research around what these voodoo doctors ask in return. So I do mention in the book kind of kidnappings and harvesting organs and that kind of thing. And I think that I left out a lot of research because, frankly, I was going on a real rabbit hole down that, and I put in there just enough that people need to know that these things happen. There was a lot that I found out that I just no.
Yeah, I mean those crime syndicates. There are a few people who talk about it, and others find it unbelievable. They say, "No, you're just making stuff up." This is so. The fraud group or crime group, let's just call them crime group. Voodoo is one thing, human sacrifice, organ harvesting. So they do a lot. They believe that through the sacrifice, by these kidnappings, and humans become better scammers. Absolutely crazy, and I think it was a great decision to leave that out, because that in itself is a very, very large topic, maybe better explored in a different book.
And I wanted it to have a fairly light-hearted tone, and that you can't make light of that very much. But also there's quite cultural sensitivities as well, so I didn't want to sort of come across as stereotyping all of one country as doing a particular practice, because of course that's not the case. But the more I'd researched into it, I would have become fascinated, and I would have wanted to have concentrated on it more than was necessary.
So your final book is around 200, let's say 230, give or take a few pages. What was the manuscript like? It was like 500, like twice that, or how long was the manuscript?
I don't know in terms of pages, because it was on A4. When I printed it out, but it was the final book is about 62,000 words, and my manuscript that I put in was 75,000. So I lost about between 10 and 13,000 words.
Yeah, I'm only asking, and it'll tee up into my next question. So let me get there actually. So many aspiring writers, they have great stories, and they keep writing ideas, but they feel I don't think I have enough here for a book. As someone who would want to write a book myself, I always struggle with that. So where in the process did you think that there was, I have enough to a story, I can write a whole book?
I was extremely lucky in that I have wanted to write a book since I was a little girl, but the thought of sitting down and writing one was so daunting that I just never did it. Now, I was on Twitter, and an author who I really like, nothing to do with romance fraud. She does fictional East End London gangland sort of stuff. She started following me. And I messaged her and said, oh, God, I really love your books. I'm so excited that you're following me. And she came back and said, I'd love to tell my agent about your Twitter stuff. So she told an agent, they got in touch with me and we went backwards and forwards and came up with a proposal, which then went out to publishers. So I was very, very lucky that I had some help from day one, because, of course, there's that whole thing. Well, I mean, in any job, really, but I think particularly in any kind of creative or entertainment role where you need a break, don't you?
Yeah.
And, you know, her sort of seeing that she liked my stuff. And then, I mean, don't get me wrong, it didn't fall into my lap. I had to push to have these meetings and all the rest of it. But I was very lucky. I think for anybody who has got a really good idea and wants to get somewhere with it, I would say don't necessarily, I mean, you know, can if you want, but don't necessarily sit and write the whole book, because it'd be really helpful to have an agent. Now, in order to get an agent, you need a really good proposal to send to them. And a proposal is really big because it's a proposal that will be sent out to publishers as well, rather than the whole thing. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a really good idea. A proposal is about 10,000 words. And it goes through every chapter, you know, what's going to be covered. It will talk about you as an author, what your background is. So why are you qualified to write this book? Why does this book need writing now? You know, all those kind of things. So I always liken it to when you're doing a PR proposal. So if you're doing a press release, you cover why, what, when, how, and who.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much the same with a book proposal.
Yeah.
Now, so, in terms of romance fraud, I was very lucky because there wasn't another book out there. So, you know, I could say, look, this needs to be written because people don't know. And also it needs to be written now because it's on the increase.
Absolutely. And there can't be enough. I think we need more books around romance. The topic of frauds in general and romance frauds in particular. So you kind of alluded to this, but the structure of the book, right? There's two things that I love about the book. One is it feels very conversational at times. I think even in the book at one point you said that is it. If anyone is still reading, hello, are you there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the tone and the way you so it's great. It feels like you're chatting and you're listening to someone, you're talking to someone. So that tone is great, but also the structure. So did you necessarily sit and outline, okay, I have all these topics and this is the structure I'll follow, this is the outline. And I think in the book proposal, you did mention that in the book proposal, you might need to outline and tell the structure. Is that what helped you? Just purely from a book nerd perspective or a writing nerd perspective, I'm trying to understand the process. Does outlining help you, or did you go through that?
I did. So with the proposal, that was a great help. However, the difference between a proposal and the actual book, you know, it can be quite different because as you write, you realise that the flow is a little bit different. Now, my agent always called it the narrative arc. I hate that phrase. I've heard it so often now. It drives me. I think, oh no, stop talking to me about the narrative arc. But it's basically, you know, where a story starts and where it takes you. And it's the part that I struggled with the most to make it into a kind of conversation, a story. And what I ended up with was, I don't know what you call it over in the States, but Post-it notes.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of sticky
notes.
So I ended up with loads of those all over the walls of my flat, all over my doors, because I'd written on each one a thing that I definitely had to include. And every day I would sort of go around and I would just think, oh no, I'm not sure that's there. So I would start moving them around. And then when I finally got them into a point that I wanted, I took a picture of them. I wrote down a sort of, I guess, you know, the chapters that I wanted and everything that I wanted to include in each of those chapters. Now, when they went through the editing process, bits and pieces got moved around, of course. But it was pretty much in line. And, you know, if I do write another book, it's exactly what I'll do again, because I'm quite a visual person and I needed something in front of me to look at.
Excellent. So, Becky, last two questions. One is where can people buy this book? I know in the UK it's been released. When is it going to be made available in the US? I snagged a digital copy on Apple Books, but if someone likes a physical copy like the one behind you, where can they get one?
So it will be available over in the States and I think Australia. I think certainly over in the States at the beginning of April, possibly the 6th of April. That's where you can get a physical copy. So you'll be able to order it on Amazon, but it will also be in bookshops as well. And I think the audiobook will be out very shortly afterwards, and that will be on. It's on Audible in the UK already, so it will follow shortly, I'm sure.
Brilliant. My wife is waiting for the audio copy. She loves listening to books, so she's waiting for the audio copy. So
oh, great.
yeah. And the last question is, so what's next for Becky? You wrote this book, and I'm sure you're having a great time promoting it, talking about it. But I think the book is getting generally very positive reviews. So what's next?
So my agent is currently talking to people about my second book proposal. But it's not going to be about fraud. So I will continue to talk about fraud because I've become completely obsessed with romance fraud now. It's possibly in an unhealthy fashion. But I want to talk about cyber flashing. So when you have a large Twitter following, you also get a large number of men sending you pictures of bits and pieces that you really don't want to see.
Yeah. So just to interject, so there you go. Men who were disappointed that Becky left you out of the book. Next book is all dick pics. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. I won't be including any pictures in this one, I have to say, because I do want people to buy it.
Yeah.
But it's a really interesting subject. When you look into the psychology of, what people expect to get out of it, but also how it affects some people. So this idea that it's just a picture. That's not actually the case when you look at some of it. But, the motivations, and some of them are quite surprising. And I've been interviewing a few people who have sent them. I've interviewed a couple of people who actually have flashed in the street. It's a really big subject. It's really interesting. Now, at the moment, it's just in a proposal stage, but I really hope to be working on it soon. It's another one that I think I can be very engaging with, but shine a light on something that is a bit more serious.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I read the book the second time yesterday, and I had outlined it, like I had marked it, highlighted parts of it, so I read it again. It's a great book, and I look forward to many, many more people reading it. And it's a great tool in general if you want to learn about romance scams. So I hope I wish you all the success, and thank you for taking time out today.
Oh, thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.